The text arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. No greeting, no pleasantries, just a command disguised as an invitation. I sat in my corner office on the 42nd floor, my gaze sweeping over the city that had witnessed my climb from absolute zero. My assistant had just confirmed 3 more acquisition meetings for the following week, and a copy of the Financial Times lay on my desk, my face on the front page of the business section. It had been 6 years since I'd last heard from my father, Robert Harding. 6 years since he'd informed me he couldn't attend my wedding because business commitments in Dubai were unreschedulable. 6 years since my mother had called 2 hours before the ceremony, her voice tight with practiced excuses about how disappointed he was to miss it. 6 years since I walked down the aisle with my Uncle Daniel beside me, my father's empty seat in the front row shouting louder than any toast or speech that followed. But now, my hotel chain was worth $580 million. And suddenly, Robert wanted an important discussion. I forwarded the text to Ethan, my husband, without a single comment. 3 dots appeared immediately. "Are you actually considering this?" Ethan's response came through. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me yearned to delete the message, block the number, and simply carry on with the life I'd built, a life that didn't require my father's approval or his presence. But another part, the one that still remembered being 8 years old, waiting by the window for him to come home from business trips, wanted answers. "I'm going," I typed back. "But not alone." Ethan's reply was instant. "I'll clear my schedule." "What time should I pick you up?" I glanced at the Financial Times again. The headline read, "Hospitality Disruptor, How 32-Year-Old Founder Built Empire Through Adaptive Reuse Properties." The article chronicled my journey from architecture school dropout to owner of 17 boutique hotels across 8 states, each one a historic building I'd personally renovated and reimagined. The journalist had called my approach revolutionary, my business acumen an inherited genius. They didn't know I'd built this empire specifically to prove I didn't need to inherit anything. Dinner was at the Gilded Lily. Naturally, my father never met anyone anywhere that didn't require reservations weeks in advance and a strictly enforced dress code. I chose my outfit with care that evening, the black Armani pantsuit I'd worn to sign my largest acquisition deal, paired with a Cartier watch Ethan had given me for our 5th anniversary. My wedding ring, a custom design featuring intertwined diamonds and sapphires, caught the light as I checked my reflection one final time. "You look like someone who belongs on the cover of Forbes," Ethan said from the doorway of our bedroom. He'd opted for a tailored navy suit that made his gray eyes stand out. "Which you do, by the way. That profile is coming next month." I turned to face him fully. "Thank you for doing this." "Are you kidding?" His voice held an edge that matched the steel in my spine. "I've waited 6 years to meet the man who was too busy to watch you get married. This should be enlightening." We arrived at the restaurant at precisely 7 p.m. I'd never been late to anything in my life, a trait my father had drilled into me during the brief periods of my childhood when he'd actually been present. The hostess recognized me immediately, not surprising given the media coverage, and her professional smile wavered slightly when she checked her reservation list. "Ms. Harding, we have you listed as party of one for the reservation under Robert Harding." "There are 2 of us," I replied smoothly. "I'm sure you can accommodate my husband." Her eyes darted to someone behind us, and I didn't need to turn around to know my father had arrived. The air in the room shifted the way it always had when Robert Harding entered a space, as if everyone's oxygen supply suddenly needed to be shared more carefully. "Sarah," his voice hadn't changed, deep, authoritative, with a kind of confidence that came from decades of people doing exactly what he wanted. I turned slowly, giving myself time to catalog the changes 6 years had wrought. He was grayer, the lines around his eyes deeper. He wore a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his Rolex gleamed under the restaurant's ambient lighting. "Father," I kept my tone neutral, professional. "This is my husband, Ethan Morrison." "Ethan, meet Robert Harding." Ethan extended his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "The father of the bride. We've heard so much about you." My father's handshake was brief, perfunctory. His gaze slid from Ethan back to me with barely concealed irritation. I wasn't aware you'd be bringing a guest. Strange, I replied, matching his cool tone. I wasn't aware this was a solo invitation. You did text family dinner, after all. Ethan is my family. The hostess cleared her throat delicately. Right this way, please. We followed her to a private section of the restaurant, a corner table that offered both intimacy and a view of the entire dining room. My father had always preferred strategic seating. As we settled into our chairs, I noted my mother's absence with interest rather than surprise. Mom's not joining us? I asked, accepting a menu from the hovering waiter. She's visiting your sister in Vermont. My father didn't look up from his own menu. This conversation is better handled directly. Ethan's hand found mine under the table, a steady pressure that reminded me I wasn't the uncertain 26-year-old who'd waited desperately for her father to show up 6 years ago. I was the woman who'd turned a single condemned Victorian mansion in Charleston into a 17-property empire that investors were currently trying to buy for nearly $500 million. What can I get you folks to drink? The waiter asked. Scotch, neat. The Glenfiddich 21. My father ordered. Sparkling water with lime, I said. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Ethan ordered the same, and I watched my father's jaw tighten imperceptibly. He always considered matching someone's drink order a sign of unity, of being part of the same world. Our matching water glasses were a subtle declaration of exactly where the alliances sat at this table. The waiter disappeared, and silence settled over us like expensive linen. My father was the first to break it. I read the article in the Financial Times. Quite impressive. Thank you. I didn't elaborate, didn't offer the eager explanations he might have expected from the daughter who'd once craved his praise. They were thorough in their research. Your mother was thrilled to see you on the front page. She's already bought 10 copies. He paused, studying me with the same analytical gaze I'd watched him use on business competitors. Though she was surprised to learn about your success from the newspaper rather than from you directly. Fascinating, I replied. I was surprised to learn about Dad's inability to attend my wedding from a phone call 2 hours before the ceremony rather than a conversation months earlier when invitations went out. Ethan coughed slightly, covering what might have been a laugh. My father's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened around his menu. Business required, Dubai, I interrupted. Yes, I remember the excuse. Unavoidable meeting with potential investors. Couldn't be rescheduled. Strange how those same investors ended up passing on the deal 3 months later, according to the business journals I've subscribed to since then. Our drinks arrived, providing a momentary buffer. My father took a long sip of his scotch before speaking again. I didn't ask you here to rehash old disagreements. No, I agreed. You asked me here because my company is worth $580 million, and suddenly I'm relevant to your world. So, let's skip the small talk. What's the important discussion you mentioned? He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, though he recovered quickly. Harding Investments is expanding our hospitality portfolio. When I saw your success, I immediately thought of the opportunities for collaboration. There it was. The real reason for this dinner, for the carefully worded text message, for the sudden interest in family connection after 6 years of silence. He didn't want to repair our relationship. He wanted a piece of my empire. Collaboration, I repeated, tasting the word like fine wine. Interesting choice of terminology. You've built something remarkable, Sarah. But imagine what you could achieve with proper financial backing and industry connections. He leaned forward slightly, shifting into the sales pitch I recognized from countless childhood dinners where business had been discussed instead of my school projects or piano recital. Harding Investments could provide capital for aggressive expansion. We have relationships with property developers in 15 countries. With our resources and your vision, we could double your portfolio within 18 months. Ethan's thumb traced circles on my palm under the table. I took a sip of my water, gathering my thoughts and organizing them into the response I'd been preparing mentally since the moment I'd read that text message. Let me make sure I understand correctly, I began. You're proposing that I accept investment capital from Harding Investments in exchange for what, exactly? Equity in my company? Board seats? Decision-making authority? Partnership, my father corrected. A true collaboration between a father and daughter. Is that the relationship we're acknowledging here? I asked. Because I'm slightly confused about when that particular dynamic became relevant again. The waiter approached to take our dinner orders, but my father waved him away with barely concealed irritation. The young man retreated quickly, probably sensing the tension that had turned our corner of the restaurant into a pressure cooker. Sarah, I know I've made mistakes. Stop. The word came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. We're not doing this. We're not having the conversation where you offer vague acknowledgement of mistakes, and I'm supposed to be grateful for the crumbs of paternal awareness. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Business sometimes requires difficult choices. Your daughter's wedding wasn't business, I replied. It was my life. It was one day, one ceremony, one moment that I'll never get back. And you chose not to be there. My father's jaw worked silently for a moment. The Dubai deal was time-sensitive. The deal that fell through anyway, I reminded him. The deal that, according to public records, wasn't even in its final negotiation stage until 2 months after my wedding. You could have been there, Dad. You simply chose not to prioritize it. He set down his scotch glass with deliberate care. I'm trying to extend an olive branch here. No, you're trying to extend an investment proposal disguised as family reconciliation. I opened my phone and pulled up a document I'd had my attorney prepare the moment I'd received his text. But since we're discussing business opportunities, let me share something interesting. Harding Investments has been quietly acquiring smaller hospitality groups over the past 18 months. 3 boutique hotel chains, 2 resort properties, and a bed and breakfast franchise. Your portfolio expansion started right around the time my first property went viral on social media. My father's expression remained carefully neutral, but I caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to have done my research, to have tracked his company's movements, to have connected the dots between his sudden interest and my rising success. I'm a businesswoman, Father. You taught me that yourself during those rare dinners when you'd actually talk to me instead of through me. I slid my phone back into my purse. I know how to analyze market patterns and competitive behavior. Harding Investments is positioning itself as a major player in the boutique hospitality sector, and my company is the crown jewel you need to legitimize that positioning. That's a rather cynical interpretation. Is it incorrect? Silence answered me. Ethan shifted beside me, and I knew he was watching my father with the same analytical intensity I'd learned to employ in business negotiations. My husband had grown up in foster care, had built his career as a civil rights attorney from nothing, and he had zero patience for privileged people who treated family connections as transactional opportunities. What if it's both? My father finally said. What if I genuinely want to repair our relationship, and I see this as an opportunity to work together? Then you should have started with the relationship part, I replied. You should have called 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 3 years ago, just to ask how I was doing. You should have acknowledged my anniversary or sent a card on my birthday or done any of the 1,000 small things that parents do to maintain connection with their children. Instead, you waited until my face was in the Financial Times. The waiter made another tentative approach, and this time I nodded to him. I'll have the sea base, please. Garden salad to start. Ethan ordered the salmon, and my father mechanically requested his usual filet mignon, though I suspected his appetite had diminished considerably. When the waiter left again, my father tried a different approach. Your sister thinks I'm being unfair to you. Chloe actually said that? I couldn't hide my surprise. My sister had always been the diplomatic one, the peacekeeper who smoothed over family conflicts and encouraged everyone to see both sides. She believes I owe you an apology for missing the wedding. He said it as if the concept was foreign, as if apologizing was something other people did. She's been quite vocal about it since the article came out. How convenient that my public success prompted this sudden family consciousness, I observed. Did Chloe also mention that she was the only family member besides Mom who bothered to show up? That she flew in from Vermont despite being 9 months pregnant and due any day, because she wanted to support me? That's what family does. Father. They show up. My father took another drink of his scotch, and I noticed his hand wasn't quite steady. I thought you understood the demands of building something significant. The sacrifices required. I do understand, I said quietly. I built something significant myself, remember? I've missed birthday parties and holiday gatherings and countless social events because business required my attention. But I've never missed the moments that mattered most to the people I love. I've never looked at someone I claimed to care about and decided they weren't worth a single day of my time. He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation had taken. You're being dramatic about a single event. A single event? I felt heat rise in my chest. Do you have any idea what that day was like for me? I spent the morning getting ready with Mom and Chloe, trying to pretend everything was fine while they both avoided mentioning your name. My makeup artist kept asking if we needed to delay the start time because surely the father of the bride was just running late. Uncle Daniel didn't even know he was walking me down the aisle until an hour before the ceremony started. My father's expression tightened, but he remained silent. I had to stand in the bridal suite and explain to my uncle why my own father wasn't there, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion behind it. A man who'd only seen me twice a year at family holidays suddenly had to step into the most important role of the day because you couldn't be bothered to show up. Do you know what he said to me? Sarah, your father doesn't know what he's missing. And he was right. You missed watching me walk down the aisle in the dress I'd spent months selecting. You missed Ethan's vows, which made half the guests cry. You missed our first dance, the toasts, the moment when Chloe's water broke during the reception and we all rushed her to the hospital where she delivered a healthy baby girl just 2 hours later. She'd been having contractions all day, but refused to miss my wedding. My father's face had gone pale. Chloe's water broke at your wedding? You didn't even know that, I said, shaking my head. Mom told you Chloe went into labor early, but she didn't mention it happened at my reception because she was trying to protect your feelings. Your youngest daughter gave birth to your first grandchild on my wedding day, and you weren't there for either of us. Ethan's hand tightened around mine, offering support while remaining quiet. He understood I needed to release years of accumulated hurt, needed to finally say all the things I'd kept blocked away. Everything worked out fine, my father said defensively. Chloe and the baby were healthy. You and Ethan got married. Life moved forward. Life moved forward without you in it, I corrected. That's what you don't seem to grasp. When you chose not to come to my wedding, you weren't just missing one day. You were showing me exactly where I ranked in your priorities, and I adjusted my expectations accordingly. The waiter approached again, hovering uncertainly near our table. Ethan gave him a slight nod, and he quickly refilled our water glasses before retreating once more. I sent a generous gift, my father offered weakly. The crystal decanter set from Cartier? Which we donated to a charity auction 3 months later, I replied. We didn't need expensive crystal from a man who couldn't give us 3 hours of his time. What I needed, was for you to be there. That's all. Just show up and be my dad for one day. My father finally met my eyes directly, and I saw something crack in his carefully maintained facade. I made a mistake. You made a choice, I repeated firmly. Own it. Don't diminish it by calling it a mistake, as if you accidentally missed my wedding the way someone might accidentally miss a dentist appointment. You received the invitation 8 months in advance. You RSVP'd yes. You knew the date, the time, the location. And then when something you deemed more important came along, you decided your daughter's wedding could be sacrificed. The Dubai deal fell through anyway. My voice rose slightly before I caught myself and lowered it again. That's what makes this particularly painful, Father. You gave up being at my wedding for a deal that ultimately failed. You traded an irreplaceable moment for a business opportunity that didn't even materialize. Was it worth it? Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. A couple at a nearby table glanced our way before quickly looking away again. The restaurant's ambient music, some classical piece I didn't recognize, seemed inappropriately cheerful given the gravity of our conversation. No, my father finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't worth it. The Dubai deal represented 2 years of work, and I represented 26 years of your daughter's life, I interrupted. Which one should have won that particular calculation? Ethan squeezed my hand again, offering silent support. I drew strength from his presence, from the knowledge that he'd been beside me through every challenge of building my business. Through the sleepless nights and risky decisions and moments of crippling self-doubt, he'd been there when my father wasn't, and that meant everything. Our salads arrived, providing another brief respite from the confrontation unfolding. I picked up my fork, suddenly realizing I was actually hungry despite the emotional intensity of the conversation. Building a business empire tended to give you an iron stomach for difficult discussions. I'm not interested in your investment, Father. The words hung in the air between us, clear and final. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. You're turning down capital because of personal feelings? That's not how successful business operates, Sarah. I'm turning down capital because I don't need it, I corrected. My company is profitable, growing steadily, and completely under my control. I've received 17 investment offers in the past 3 weeks alone. 3 of them from firms significantly larger than Harding Investments. I've turned down all of them because I built this empire without outside interference, and I plan to keep it that way. His eyes narrowed slightly. You've received offers from Sterling Capital, haven't you? And probably Prescott Holdings. I've received offers from firms I'm not at liberty to discuss, I replied smoothly. But yes, some of the biggest names in hospitality investment have approached me. They're offering better terms, more capital, and fewer strings than you're proposing. Yet here I am, declining all of them, including yours. Then why meet with me at all? Frustration bled into his tone. If you're so determined to go it alone, why waste both our time with this dinner? Because unlike you, I believe in giving people chances to do the right thing, I answered. I wanted to see if you'd acknowledge the real issue between us, or if you'd just pretend the past 6 years didn't happen. Now I have my answer. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision. Enlighten me. What should I have said when you walked in tonight? You should have apologized, I said simply. Not for missing a business opportunity or making a strategic error, but for hurting your daughter. For missing one of the most important days of her life. For choosing money over family. I've built an empire worth $3 billion, and I've built one worth $500 million without your help, I cut him off. The difference is that I haven't sacrificed the people I love to do it. Ethan and I are partners in every sense of the word. He's attended every major milestone in my business journey, just as I've supported his career. We show up for each other, even when it's inconvenient. My father's jaw clenched. Your generation doesn't understand what real sacrifice means. You want work-life balance and participation trophies. Stop. Ethan interjected quietly, speaking for the first time in several minutes. With respect, Mr. Harding, you don't get to minimize what your daughter has accomplished by dismissing her generation. Sarah works 80-hour weeks regularly. She's flown to 3 different states in a single day to handle property emergencies. She's negotiated deals while recovering from the flu and reviewed contracts during our honeymoon. She understands sacrifice perfectly well. I squeezed Ethan's hand gratefully. My father looked taken aback by the interruption, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by someone he barely acknowledged. She also understands, Ethan continued, his voice calm but firm, that success means nothing if you're surrounded by people who resent you. Your daughter isn't asking for much. She's simply asking you to acknowledge that missing her wedding was wrong, and to decide whether you want to be part of her life going forward. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. My father stared at Ethan for a long moment, and I watched something shift in his expression. Perhaps he was recognizing that my husband wasn't intimidated by his wealth or reputation. Or perhaps he was simply unused to hearing such direct honesty. Either way, the atmosphere at the table changed subtly. "You're a lawyer?" my father asked. "Civil rights attorney," Ethan confirmed. "I represent individuals and families fighting discrimination cases against corporations and government entities." "Must be challenging work." "It is," Ethan agreed. "But unlike business deals, my cases involve real people whose lives hang in the balance. I can't afford to prioritize profit over people, because people are the entire point." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but perfectly clear. My father took a long drink of his scotch, finishing it, and signaled for another. "I gave you your trust fund," he pointed out. "That's what you used to buy your first property." "The trust fund Grandma Harding left me in her will," I corrected. "The one you tried to convince me to invest in Harding Investments instead of wasting on real estate." "I still have the email you sent when I told you I was buying that Victorian mansion in Charleston. You wrote, and I quote, 'This venture will fail within 18 months. Real estate development requires expertise you don't possess.' I printed that email and framed it. It hangs in my office." My father's second scotch arrived, and he took an immediate sip. "I was trying to protect you from making a costly mistake." "You were trying to control me," I replied. "Just like you tried to control my career choice, my college major, and my decision to marry Ethan instead of the investment banker you kept inviting to family dinners. The difference is that I stopped seeking your approval and started trusting my own judgment. Best decision I ever made." Ryan Matthews would have been an excellent match. Ryan Matthews was boring, pretentious, and talked exclusively about quarterly earnings projections, I said flatly. He also made several inappropriate comments about my appearance and suggested I'd be better suited to interior design than actual business management. "You thought he was an excellent match because his father runs a hedge fund." My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. "He came from a good family." "Ethan came from foster care and built a career defending people's constitutional rights," I countered. "He treats me as an equal partner, celebrates my successes, and has never once suggested I should limit my ambitions." "Which one sounds like the better match to you?" No response came, and I continued. "Here's what you don't understand, Father. I didn't build this company to impress you, or to prove I deserved your attention. I built it because I discovered I was good at something you never gave me credit for. I found beauty in abandoned buildings, potential in properties everyone else had written off. I created jobs and revitalized neighborhoods and made spaces where people create memories. And I did all of it without your money, your connections, or your approval." My father's face had gone slightly red, though whether from anger or embarrassment, I couldn't determine. "I've always been proud of your accomplishments." "Have you?" I challenged. "When I graduated summa cum laude from architecture school, you told me it was impractical. When I bought my first property, you said I was wasting my trust fund on a fixer-upper fantasy. When I opened my third hotel, you told Mom it was cute that Sarah had a hobby. You've never been proud of my accomplishments, Father. You've been waiting for me to fail so you could swoop in and show me how business should really be done." "That's not fair," you continued. And now that I've succeeded beyond even my own expectations, you want to claim some of that success as your own. You want to tell your investors and board members that you always knew your daughter had potential, that you mentored me in business principles, that Harding Investments is expanding through smart family partnerships. Except none of that is true. Ethan cleared his throat softly. Maybe we should. No, I said, turning to my husband with gratitude in my eyes. I need to finish this. He nodded, understanding as always. I turned back to my father, who was now staring at his salad as if it contained answers to questions he didn't want to ask. Here's what I'm willing to offer you, Father. Not a business partnership, not an investment opportunity, but a chance to actually be part of my life. I pulled a small envelope from my purse and placed it on the table between us. Ethan and I are renewing our vows next year on our 7th anniversary. We're having a small ceremony in Charleston at the Havenwood Inn, the first property I ever renovated. You're invited to attend, not as a business contact or potential investor, but as my father. He stared at the envelope without touching it. There are conditions, I added. You show up on time. You stay for the entire ceremony and reception. You don't bring business cards or discuss investments or try to network with my guests. You simply be there as a parent celebrating their child's happiness. If you can do that, then maybe we can start rebuilding something real between us. And if I can't? The question came out quietly, almost defeated. Then at least we'll both know where we stand. I picked up my water glass, took a long drink, and set it down with finality. I don't need your money, Father. I don't need your business connections or your industry expertise. What I needed was a dad who showed up when it mattered. I've spent 6 years learning to live without that, and I've built a pretty incredible life in the process. The question is whether you can set aside Robert Harding, the businessman, long enough to be just a father for one day. Our entrees arrived, carried by 2 servers who must have sensed the atmosphere because they worked in efficient silence before disappearing. The sea bass on my plate looked perfect, and I realized I was going to enjoy this meal regardless of my father's response. I'd said everything I needed to say. We ate in relative quiet, the tension gradually dissipating into something more manageable. My father asked a few questions about my hotels, and I answered them politely, but without the detailed enthusiasm I reserved for people who genuinely cared about my work rather than its monetary value. Ethan shared a funny story about one of his recent cases, and I was grateful for his ability to inject normalcy into the surreal situation. When dessert arrived, I'd ordered the chocolate torte, my favorite since childhood. My father finally picked up the envelope I'd placed on the table. Charleston in June, he read from the invitation visible through the translucent paper. That's during the investor conference in Chicago. I know, I said simply. I checked your public calendar before selecting the date. His eyes met mine, and for the first time that evening, I saw something beyond the calculating businessman. It might have been regret, or recognition, or simply the acknowledgement that his daughter had learned to play chess as well as he did. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. I finished my torte and signaled for the check, which I fully intended to pay despite any protests. Thank you for dinner, Father. It's been enlightening. Ethan and I stood to leave, and my father rose as well, though his movement seemed slower, older somehow. Sarah. I paused, waiting. The hotel chain. It really is remarkable work. Thank you, I replied, meaning it this time. I learned from watching you that building something meaningful requires sacrifice. I just chose to sacrifice different things. We left him standing at the table, the envelope still in his hand. As Ethan and I walked through the restaurant toward the exit, I felt lighter than I had in years. The hostess smiled at us as we passed, and I noticed several diners watching with poorly concealed interest. Let them look. Let them wonder about the well-dressed couple leaving the corner table where Robert Harding sat alone. You are magnificent, Ethan murmured as we stepped into the cool evening air. Absolutely magnificent. I had good support. I leaned into him, grateful for his steady presence. Do you think he'll come? I honestly don't know, my husband admitted. But I know this, whether he shows up or not, you're going to have an amazing ceremony surrounded by people who love you, and that's what matters. He was right. Of course, Ethan was always right about the important things. My phone buzzed as we reached our car. A text from my sister, Chloe. Mom just called. Dad told her about dinner. She's crying happy tears because you invited him to the vow renewal. Whatever you said to him, thank you. I showed the message to Ethan, who smiled. See, already making a difference. We'll see, I replied, but I felt a small spark of hope kindle in my chest. We'll see. 6 weeks later, my phone rang at 6:30 a.m. I was already awake, reviewing acquisition contracts for a historic theater in Austin I wanted to convert into a boutique hotel. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. Miss Harding, this is Susan from your father's office. Mr. Harding asked me to block out June 15th on his calendar. He wanted me to confirm the ceremony start time and venue address. I sat up straighter, nearly spilling my coffee. The ceremony starts at 4 p.m. at the Havenwood Inn in Charleston. That's the name of the venue. We renamed it after we got married. Perfect. I'll add those details. He also wanted me to ask if there's a dress code. Garden formal, I replied, my heart beating faster. And Susan, thank you for calling. Of course, Miss Harding. Have a wonderful day. I sat down my phone and looked at Ethan, who'd been pretending to be asleep, but was now watching me with barely contained curiosity. He's coming, I whispered. Dad's actually coming. Ethan pulled me into his arms, and I let myself feel the full weight of what this meant. My father had made a choice, had prioritized being present over a business conference, had decided that maybe, just maybe, being my dad was worth more than being Robert Harding, the investor. It didn't erase 6 years of absence or the pain of walking down the aisle without him. It didn't automatically repair everything that had broken between us. But it was a beginning, a foundation we could build on if we both chose to do the work. As the morning sun streamed through our bedroom window, I thought about the abandoned buildings I'd transformed into thriving hotels. I'd learned that restoration required patience, vision, and a willingness to dig through layers of damage to find the solid structure underneath. Maybe relationships worked the same way. Maybe some things were worth rebuilding after all. My empire was worth $580 million, but the invitation in my father's hand might turn out to be priceless. Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with someone you loved, and then wait to see if they'd step over it?